There are a number of potential issues with this, though. The Supreme Court really doesn't have great control over the administration of justice in this nation. We have a decentralized organization of courts that are physically dispersed across the nation, and justice is administered by independent, life-tenured judges. These judges can't be fired and can only be removed for the most serious offenses. Simply writing a bunch of bad decisions or decisions the Supreme Court doesn't like isn't nearly enough. So this isn't anything like a typical employer-employee relationship where judges are truly accountable to the Supreme Court or anything like that. In fact, only Congress can remove a federal judge, and the convention or precedent is that Congress doesn't remove judges for political reasons. They respect the separation of powers enough to only use the power of impeachment when a judge has committed a significant crime or scandalous act. Similarly, the Supreme Court cannot distribute the caseload to the lower courts. That distribution is done by the plaintiffs, meaning that certain cases end up in certain jurisdictions, at least partially based on where the person suing believes she will be successful. When a lower court disregards a directive, the court has several options available. It may hear a case a second time, it may rebuke the lower court judge, it may issue a writ of mandamus ordering the lower court judge to take a specified action, or it may just assign the case to a different court entirely. The problem here is that all of these alternatives are costly in terms of time and monitoring. Most circuit court judges realize that the probability of the court reviewing their decision is very low. But if a circuit court does press their luck, the court will monitor them more closely. Courts don't want this, just like most people don't. Think about your professors as an example. We all have a fair amount of freedom here to teach our classes as we want. Professor Kramer is my boss, and I'm sure he doesn't watch these videos to make sure I'm teaching the classes exactly the way he wants me to. Nor does the dean, who has 20 times as many professors to look over as Professor Kramer does. Nor does the provost, who has 2 to 3 times as many as that. Nor does President Payno, etc., etc. They have to trust that I'm doing what I should be doing, and I like it that way because I have the freedom to teach my classes however I want without a lot of supervision. It's a good life. However, let's say I get a bunch of evals that say Professor Murphy never showed up to class. When he did, he was high on Diet Shasta, caffeinated, not even the caffeine-free stuff. Yelled a 50-minute string of obscenities at us, and then went home. Clearly, I'm not doing my job the right way, so the administrators would probably take notice, and then someone's going to start watching my lecture videos or stopping by my classroom to make sure I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing. I clearly don't abuse my freedom to that level yet, but a big part of me does what I'm supposed to be doing because I don't want anyone looking over my shoulder. Judges act the same way. Lower court judges don't want that increased scrutiny and don't like to be overruled, so they typically will act the way they're supposed to. There are also professional incentives to being a good agent, like the potential of being promoted up the food chain to higher courts or potentially even the Supreme Court. Overall, the system keeps going because of professional pride and these sorts of incentives. But there's clearly the potential for agency loss along the way, where people could act as bad actors and force the principals to either monitor more or intervene in other ways. So, the vast majority of cases are never heard by the Supreme Court, and no one has the right to be heard by the Supreme Court. So, how do judges select the cases that they hear? It's another excellent question. Great job. First, the appellant, or the side who wants to appeal the lower court's decision, files what is called a writ of certiorari. This is basically a request to have your case heard by the Supreme Court. The court then goes through all of the writs and applies what is called the Rule of 4. This means that if 4 Supreme Court justices agree that a case is worthy of being heard, then the court will hear it. What a coincidence, the Rule of 4 has to do with 4 judges. Weird stuff, right? Well, the Supreme Court can only hear a small handful of cases every year, so this is a pretty high bar for acceptance. There aren't any official rules, but there are some typical types of cases that will be heard. The first type includes cases that attempt to resolve conflicts in lower court decisions between different circuits, different districts. The idea is that justice should look the same in every court, so if multiple courts disagree, the Supreme Court will likely intervene to make sure that we have a national set of standards. The next type of case is where a number of amicus curiae briefs are heard. This word literally means Latin for friend of the court. Amicus, friend, curiae, court. It's a type of document people can file who are not parties to a case, so you're not suing nor being sued, but you have a strong opinion on the case. So, for example, if we have a case having to do with the FCC, internet privacy, something like that, companies like Apple, Google, Yahoo might not be involved, but they might file amicus briefs to share their opinion on the case with the court. When Supreme Court justices see a lot of these briefs from prominent individuals, they notice a case that might have far-reaching implications and one that should be resolved sooner rather than later by the court. The final type is when the Solicitor General is involved. Solicitor General works for the federal government, and one of his or her main responsibilities is to file amicus briefs on behalf of the United States government. When she files one of these briefs, the Supreme Court is much more likely to hear a case.